If you're starting out in your freelance career, you might be feeling super overwhelmed by all the things you feel need to get done in order to actually build the successful career you probably want. And I can relate, I was there. And in this video, I really want to go over my journey as a freelancer to growing my business and finding success as a creative and some of the things that happened to me along the way. So in this video, I want to focus on three main aspects. The first one being taking the leap itself, making that terrifying decision to go out on your own and start a business. The second thing I want to chat to you guys about is working with actual clients, taking on real projects, what that was like for me, and how I actually navigated the process of taking what was previously a theoretical concept and actually bringing it into the real world and working with actual clients. And then lastly, I'm going to touch briefly on where I am now, what my career looks like, and what I'm going to be doing next. So let's get started. Taking the leap. This is probably one of the most daunting and terrifying aspects of the freelance journey. I don't think to this date I've actually experienced anything more terrifying than those first couple of weeks where you're wrestling with this idea of do I or don't I, or what if or what when. And so my journey really came to a pinnacle after college. So I went to a very well-known design school in Cape Town, and there is where I really fell in love with the design world. Before that, I'd done fine art in high school and I'd always been an illustrator and I really loved creating. But going to a design-focused college or university really gave me focus, and it gave me an idea of what to expect within the industry. This college particularly focused on preparing students for the real world. And so their course was highly practical and focused on basically addressing brief after brief after brief after brief, and then learning how to present your work and solve creative problems. And so after 3 years, I was extremely well equipped to translate and meet a brief. What I wasn't equipped for was starting an actual business and working out how that actually works. But I did thankfully have the backing of a great skill set and really good training. And I think this is key to note, because a lot of the time when you're starting your business, there's a couple of confidence issues. And where I combated that was feeling confident that at least I could design, that at least I had been trained well, and that at least I knew I could do the job. I might not be the best designer out there, and I might not know how to tackle a full branding project or a website project or something like that, but I knew I could design. And so I knew I had skills that I could grow and that I could sell. The itch to start freelancing was something that had been in me for many, many years. I come from an entrepreneurial family, and so starting my own business was something I was probably always going to do. It was just a matter of when. And in college, all the lecturers and everybody understandably spoke about how you don't just leave college and start your own thing or suddenly start a business or start a studio. There's usually a rite of passage that has to be walked. You have to go to another agency, you have to learn the ropes, you have to do your time, essentially as a bit of a pixel pusher or a junior designer, and you really have to earn the right to call yourself an expert. And I had full respect for that process. I thought, it was absolutely key, and I did agree. The restless entrepreneur in me did not agree, and there were parts of me that really kicked against that and really was like, I'm going to prove you wrong, I'm going to do it anyway, I'll figure it out. But at the end of the day, logic won. And when I graduated college, I got a job at a small studio focused on brand. And it was a really exciting opportunity for me, because I thought, okay, here's a nice opportunity where I get to sort of stretch my skills, learn under the guidance of a very small team, but I get that industry experience that everybody was telling me I needed. And it wasn't long into that job before I realized 9 to 5 is not for me. And it wasn't just about the 9 to 5. It wasn't just about the fact that the sort of rigidity of the day and the process really wasn't going to work for me. It was just also working under the guidance of somebody else. And if I'm being perfectly honest, I'm terrible at being employed. I hate being told what to do. I hate being told when to do it and how to do it. I'd much rather wrestle with it in my own time and figure it out. In hindsight, I do know that the naivety of that frustration was potentially misplaced, and I think that I needed to shut up and learn. But I did do that for a short while. I think the other situation that I found myself in was that about a month into that job, I actually found out I was going to become a mom. And so I realized that I was faced with an important choice. Did I want to carry on working and essentially hire help to look after my kid, or did I want to be at home? And quite simply, after wrestling with it for a while, I decided this is the perfect opportunity for me to put my money where my mouth is and build the business I wanted to build my way. And that would give me the opportunity to be at home with my daughter who was on her way. And it would also give me the freedom to build what I wanted to build in the way I wanted to build it. So the decision was actually quite a natural one. And that was actually the easy part. The difficult part was telling the world and then backing that up with how I was going to do that. So the first part of this whole learning process was handing in my resignation and actually accepting that this was the decision I was going to make. And that's when the hard work really started. I would come home every night from my full-time job and I would jump on my laptop and I would research. And when I say I consumed every piece of available information out there, that is exactly what I did. So every article I could read, every video I could watch, every free course that I could access, because at the time I couldn't afford paid courses, I took them and I read and I consumed this content, and I had a notebook with me which I wrote down all my ideas and everything that I thought I could offer the world, and I just started brainstorming. I started this while I was still working because I knew I had 2 months in which to plan my escape, essentially, because once I left that job, I had nothing else, and I knew that it was going to be a matter of survival after that. So I started planning everything that I knew I could do and putting that down and trying to work out how I was going to market myself. I didn't have something as cool as the 6-figure freelance course, which you guys have access to now. Check it out if you haven't already. But I had to sort of make it up as I went along. And I knew instinctively that I was going to have to sell what I already knew how to do. And so I made sure that I tried to bundle that. I looked at marketing graphics, blog graphics, doing GIFs and GIFs, doing all sorts of things. I taught myself a bit of WordPress. I taught myself how to use Divi. I taught myself a little bit of Squarespace, and basically realized there was so much information out there that I could learn, so many skills that I could learn, and so many pieces of tech that I didn't understand how to use. And it was really, really overwhelming. I remember sitting one evening late that night, having put in 3 hours of work, and just feeling so disheartened that I was never going to get anywhere near what these other professional designers were doing. Was I ever going to know what I needed to know? Was I ever going to be good enough? And was I ever going to have space to do everything I needed to do? Well, in hindsight, yes, I did have the space, and yes, I would eventually know how to do it and how to deliver a good product to my clients, but it definitely took time. So having a look at my website now and where I am now is a reminder of those times where I sat and learned everything that I could possibly learn about the freelancing world. Some of the key things that I really did in those beginning stages was making sure that I was contextualizing my learning. So making sure that everything I learned, I was being clever about what I was learning. So instead of, trying to learn new skills, I tried to learn everything I could about the skills I already had, if that makes sense. So I knew in college I'd studied brand and advertising and marketing. And so I focused my attention on those skills. And slowly but surely started gaining a bit of confidence and actually started, slowly working out whether or not I wanted to be an independent designer or whether I wanted to be a studio. And so all these decisions were mulling around in my head all the time. I eventually made the decision to become a studio rather than an independent designer. And this was a decision that was purely made because of the fact that I realized in South Africa at the time, just being a junior graphic designer straight out of college was really not going to do me any favors at all in terms of reputation. I knew that I was going to need to present myself as more of an accomplished professional. And the best way to do that was to give myself a studio name and, put out a website and some social media that allowed me to invent an identity and essentially to hide a little bit of that insecurity and really become something else and work out how to sell myself as a professional. So that was a very careful and strategic decision. I then, of course, had to put in the time trying to come up with a name and trying to work out what I was going to be called and what I was going to look like. And so there were hours and hours that went into that as well. To this day, I think I've done 4 iterations of my actual website. Now it's just a coming soon page because I'm fully booked and don't actually have space to take on more clients. So I've technically closed the studio. So these things change with time, and it's always key to remember that constant iteration and learning and flexibility are going to be your friends when starting a freelance career. I also knew in the beginning that I was really, really bad with social media and marketing. Even though I'd studied it at school, I hated it. I was really bad at Instagram, really terrible at being consistent. I enjoyed consuming content on there, but I was really bad at creating it and maintaining my social media. What I did realize I was very good at, though, was relationship and conversation and connection. And so I focused my attention solely on that. And when I eventually started taking on clients, which I'm going to get to in a second, I realized I could deliver a really good experience. And while my design skills may not have been absolutely excellent at the time, and I had a lot of learning still to do, I knew I could actually give my clients a good experience. I could make them feel welcome. I could give them a red carpet experience, even though their budgets were really small. And I was very grateful for every client that came my way. And so I made sure I put in all this time and effort to making sure they had a really excellent experience, with the goal of encouraging them to talk about their experience with me and to grow that business through referral. I intentionally didn't focus my time too much on a website or a blog or marketing or Google Ads or anything of that kind. I focused on the thing I really cared about, which was experience. And I still do that to this day. I'm still terrible at focusing on social media. I'm still terrible at marketing. Instead, I really try and focus on experience. And I trust that what people say about me will bring in more work. As the business grows, I realize that I need a bit more of a robust strategy. So that's what we're focusing on now. But in the beginning, it was enough. And I really did focus on referrals. So when it came to taking on real clients, this is where the real learning started. And I was lucky enough to have a client come to me through somebody that I knew at the time. It was actually a friend's aunt who came to me having had a pretty bad experience before with a logo design project. And she really wasn't happy with how it had turned out. And I had done a bit of brand work before at the studio, and obviously I'd studied it at college, and so I thought I can definitely help. And so I offered to help. And lo and behold, she accepted and said, great, send me a proposal, which is when my first panic set in, because I thought, I don't know what that is, and I don't know how to do one. And so began the lesson of learning on the job and doing what you can with what you've got. And so I put together a proposal, sent it off to her, and she chose a package, and off we went. And it was a really wonderful creative project. And I got to really focus on it. It was the only one I had at the time. and really got to focus on creating something for this client and testing out my process and really wrestling with the idea of managing a client. I learned a lot about communication. I learned a lot about managing my own deadlines. It's very difficult to actually maintain deadlines when nobody else is really enforcing them on you. It's kind of totally up to you. And so in that, I learned a lot about discipline, and I learned a lot about holding myself accountable in that process. And it was a really rewarding project, and she was really happy with the end result. And it was so exciting to see my work out there being appreciated. I then went on to actually have my daughter and took 3 months off to just be with her and to focus on that. And when I came back into the design world, it was a total culture shock. I remember taking on my first sort of freelance brief after that time, realizing, I really needed a way to make money now. And listening to this client talk me through this brief and just feeling so confused and so overwhelmed. And she was talking, and it wasn't even complex, but I didn't understand a word she was saying, and I felt so confused and so overwhelmed. And I remember going home, phoning my mom and saying, I'm never going to make it as a designer. I'm so terrible. I don't even understand how to do a normal brief. Like, what am I going to do? And once I came off that wobble, I just sat down and did what I could to understand. And I remember writing her an email and asking for some help. And I think what I really learned in that process, even though it wasn't a branding project or something like that, it was literally a couple of flyers that I had to do. I learned to ask questions. I learned, if you don't understand, go back and check. Make sure that you're clear. Make sure that you've understood the brief properly. Make sure that you've heard your client properly. Go back and check. And, you put your ego in your back pocket and you go and you learn and you make sure that you understand. And so that's what I did. And that freelance sort of job carried me through till the end of that year, where I picked up 1 or 2 other clients. And each time I picked up a client through referral, I worked on refining my process. I redid my questionnaires. I redid my proposals. I redid my presentation templates. Every time I got a new client, I redid everything. And you'll hear a lot of designers say to you, don't do that, buy a template, blah, blah, blah. And I tried that, and I was never happy with the templates I downloaded. I always wanted them to be better. I wanted them to be more detailed. I wanted them to be more clear. And so my focus was on constant iteration. Constant attention was paid to my process, to my technique, to making sure my clients felt really taken care of every step of the way. Making sure I worked on how I presented, making sure I worked on how I articulated. I always practiced my presentations beforehand. Sometimes I would record myself and listen to it, as painful as that was. But for me, I accredit a lot of my success, so-called, to my commitment to practice and my commitment to iterating every time I got a client, and even in between clients. If there was something new that came along, I made sure I learned how to do it. And this brings me to Webflow, where I discovered Webflow, taught myself how to use it, and then actually managed to sell my first project to a client shortly after that. And still had a bunch of learning to do on that job. But I was always out of my comfort zone, and I was always happy there. And as difficult as it was, I focused on making sure I took on jobs that allowed me to grow. And I definitely underpriced myself for a very long time, but I don't regret it, because what I learned in that process, and what I learned by giving myself space to just be creative and to create amazing solutions for clients, meant that what I got out of that was a wonderful relationship with that client, a collaborative, strong and connected relationship, and a chance to learn. And then as I've grown, and as my skills have improved, and as my technical skills have grown, and my confidence has grown, I've managed to match that, delivery of service and skill with better pricing. And so I've managed to gradually raise my prices and get to the point where I feel now that I'm being paid what the work is worth and what the process is worth and what the attention is worth. It didn't come without a lot of learning. So I made some epic mistakes along the way, some of which included just not trusting my gut, taking on clients I knew I shouldn't have taken on, not paying attention to the gut feeling, not paying attention to red flags, and I had to learn the hard way. But the positive of that is that I think as creative people, we are quite resilient, and it's always possible, I believe, to bounce back if your heart is in the right place and if your intentions are good and if you're focused on improving the whole time and making sure that you keep your focus on your client and how they are experiencing the journey and making sure that you're solving those problems at the end of the day and staying focused. So where am I now? I am now successfully running a freelance studio and actually about to, or have partnered with a project strategist and project manager. And her and I have started our own business, which is happily booked until 2023. And we are very, very proud of the journey her and I have walked together. But I would never have met her had I not taken on this adventure of freelancing work and kept my heart and mind open to opportunity and collaboration. Some of the key things that I've learned along the way is 2 minds are always better than 1. Wherever possible, aim to collaborate or learn from others. You know, it's something to consume content here on YouTube with each other, but find yourself a mentor, find yourself a community, find yourself other creators that you can share with and learn with, because a shared journey is always more valuable than just a journey you would walk completely on your own. Where my business really took off is when I started partnering with other people who did a better job at certain things than me. And I think part of maturing as a designer is coming into your own in terms of knowing where your strengths are, knowing where your weaknesses are, and then understanding how to collaborate with other people who do a better job than you do, and working out how to bring that in so that your clients get the best possible experience. So it's an exciting journey, and I hope to keep learning and find better balance. I think one of my biggest lessons is not paying attention to getting tired and not paying attention to burnout and to balance, and making sure that even though the hustle was absolutely necessary, don't get me wrong, I think that, balance is a luxury that some people just don't have. I know I didn't really have it. I had to work as hard as I did for that many years because otherwise I wouldn't have been able to put food on the table. But now that I'm in a place where I can afford to create more space and more balance, that's the next learning curve, and that's the next part of the journey, where learning how to bring in more things that make me happy and learning how to keep learning and to stay agile and to accept when I'm tired and I'm starting to make mistakes and drop balls, and to cut myself a bit of slack and know when to take a break. And that is a huge part of the freelancing and business journey, is you really have to pay attention to yourself. You have to get to know you. You have to understand what your work style is like. You have to understand where your strengths are, how to play to those strengths, how to leverage them, how to sort of walk into your identity as a designer, and then also how to pay attention to and mind those weaknesses and those flaws. They are part of the same coin after all. So I plan to never stop creating. I'm a born creative. I absolutely love the art of design and the business of design and working out how to share what I do with all of you. And so I just want to thank you for spending some time with me, listening to my story. I hope that you got something out of it and that you are inspired to know that no matter what your circumstances are, there are always opportunities for you to build a successful business as a creative. It's doable, it's possible, and it's exciting. It doesn't come without its hurdles and challenges. So if you're experiencing anything that is overwhelming you, please leave a comment below and I'll be sure to reply with my advice or my thoughts. If you have any questions about any part of this video that you'd like to know more of, or anything specific that you'd like me to discuss in a video in the future, also let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.